Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take your curated stack of sources and really try to sift through them to find those invaluable nuggets of knowledge, those key insights.
Yeah, pull out what really matters.
Exactly. Our mission today, it's not just about summarizing. We want to cut through all the noise, and give you a really clear understanding of some, well, honestly fascinating ideas, and maybe some counterintuitive ones too.
Yeah.
They come from all over the place. Financial markets, the psychology behind our decisions, even ancient strategy, modern leadership principles.
Quite a mix.
It is, yeah, a truly eclectic mix. And we're pretty excited to explore what it all means for you.
Indeed. And what I find particularly captivating about this collection is, well, precisely how interconnected everything is.
Right.
These aren't just, isolated topics floating around. We'll be connecting the dots here across economics, human behavior, organizational strategy.
Right.
We're really aiming for those genuine aha moments, the kind that don't just give you information, but actually transform it into something you can use, some actionable understanding.
Yeah, something practical.
Exactly. That this material, it really offers such a rich tapestry, insights into how we make choices, how we build organizations that last, and how we navigate these complex, often really uncertain challenges we all face today.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's unpack this. Where should we start? Maybe right at the beginning. How we, as individuals, as societies even, try to make sense of the world. And the choices we have, especially when things feel so, well, uncertain. It's funny, we often like to think of ourselves as these perfectly rational actors.
It's a logic machine.
Yeah, carefully weighing pros and cons, making decisions based purely on logic. But the sources you brought together, they reveal something far more nuanced, don't they?
They really do.
Our choices seem to be deeply, sometimes subtly, influenced by things we might not even consciously recognize. Expert, this really makes me wonder, how reliable is our judgment, especially in these fast-changing, unpredictable environments we keep finding ourselves in?
That's a huge question, and it's one Daniel Kahneman and Gary Klein really dig into in Originals. They highlight that our intuitions, those gut feelings we often lean on, they're only truly trustworthy under very specific conditions. Basically, when we've built up experience in predictable environments.
Predictable environments, okay. Like
Well,
what?
Think about a seasoned doctor, someone who can diagnose a patient based on really subtle symptoms. Or a veteran firefighter walking into a burning building and just knowing where the danger is almost instantly.
Right, they've seen it before. Many times.
Exactly. In fields like that, there are consistent, repeated patterns. The link between past events and the present situation is pretty stable. And that allows experience to train intuition, making it remarkably accurate.
So it's not magic, it's pattern recognition honed over time.
Precisely. And this also applies to, say, physicists, accountants, insurance analysts, chess masters too. They operate in domains where cause and effect relationships are generally consistent. Their experience genuinely translates into reliable gut feelings.
Okay, so predictable feedback loops are key. You do X, Y, consistently happens, your brain learns that connection. Makes sense.
But here's the critical pivot. The same just cannot be said for professions operating in truly unpredictable environments. Like stockbrokers.
Yeah.
Or political forecasters. In those domains, past events just don't reliably predict the present. The market today isn't necessarily going to behave like last year's market, right?
Not at all. Too many variables.
Exactly. And think about admissions officers, court judges, intelligence analysts, even psychiatrists. Experience alone doesn't necessarily mean their intuitive judgment gets significantly better over time.
Really? Why not?
Well, the patterns they observe are often too inconsistent, too noisy, or maybe just too complex to form reliable intuitions. There isn't that stable feedback loop.
Wow. That's a powerful insight and kind of unsettling, actually. So the implication is, in our increasingly unpredictable modern world, the very lessons we think we've learned from experience could actually lead us astray.
Absolutely. The lessons of experience, while they're invaluable in stable domains,
Yeah.
they can easily mislead us when the environment is constantly shifting.
So what's the answer then?
Well, it places a growing premium on careful, systematic analysis, on really thinking things through, rather than just blindly trusting our gut feelings.
More system 2 thinking, less system 1.
You could put it that way, yeah. It's a call to move beyond mere instinct when the environment is constantly in flux It challenges us to be more deliberate, more analytical in our decision-making.
You know, what I find truly mind-bending here is how our own brains seem to trick us sometimes. We think we're making logical choices, but then a book like Thinking Fast and Slow comes along and reveals we're often playing a completely different game, especially when risk is involved. Tell us about prospect theory. It's not just about the absolute amount of money, is it?
No, you're absolutely right, it's not. Prospect theory fundamentally challenges that old idea that we make decisions based purely on the objective value of wealth. Instead, it shows we evaluate options based on potential gains and losses
Wow.
relative to a specific reference point.
Yeah.
And our emotional response to those gains and losses is, well, surprisingly asymmetrical.
Asymmetrical, how do you mean?
Kahneman highlights what he calls the fourfold pattern. It describes how most people's preferences show this specific and often pretty surprising pattern when they're faced with gambles versus sure things.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Right. So first, when it comes to potential gains, people are generally risk-averse.
Risk averse for gains. Okay.
Yeah. Imagine you're offered a choice. Option A is a 95% chance to win $10,000. Option B is a guaranteed $9,500. What do most people choose?
I'd probably take the $9,500, the sure thing.
Exactly. Most people prefer the sure, smaller gain.
Yeah.
We'd rather take the guaranteed money, even if the risky option might have a slightly higher expected value on paper. That certainty just feels safer and more appealing.
A bird in the hand, right?
Precisely. But here's where it gets really interesting. When it comes to potential losses, that preference flips entirely. People become risk-seeking.
Risk-seeking for losses, so the opposite.
Completely. If you're faced with a choice between, say, a 95% chance to lose $10,000 or a sure loss of $9,500, a significant number of people would actually prefer the risky option. They'll take the gamble with the larger potential loss over the sure, smaller loss.
Wow, why? That seems irrational.
Well, it seems that way if you only think about final wealth states. But prospect theory suggests it's about the feeling of loss. It's almost as if the pain of a definite loss is so great, so psychologically painful, that we'd rather risk an even bigger loss for just a chance to avoid any loss at all.
So our brains are kind of hardwired to feel the sting of a loss much more intensely than the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
That's a great way to put it. Loss aversion is powerful.
Which means we might gamble desperately to avoid a sure loss, even when the odds are against us. And maybe play it too safe when we should be taking calculated risks for gains.
That's the pattern, yes.
The insight here sticks to be challenge your gut reactions, especially when loss is on the table, because your intuition might be pushing you towards irrational gambles.
Absolutely. And this theory fundamentally shows that our perception of fairness and our economic decisions are heavily influenced by these reference points, what we consider our baseline or what we feel entitled to.
Entitled to. How does that play out?
Well, the sources indicate, for example, that merchants and employers often consider what customers and employees feel entitled to, rather than just looking at raw profit. Raising a price, even if it's justified by rising costs, might be perceived as an unfair loss by customers relative to the price they're used to.
So it triggers that loss aversion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that can trigger strong negative reactions, even boycotts. It's not just about the objective numbers. It's about the psychological framing of those numbers and how they impact perceived gains and losses relative to that reference point.
That understanding of individual cognitive biases is fascinating, but what truly seems to amplify their impact is when they scale up, right? Affecting entire systems.
Yes, definitely.
We see this play out catastrophically sometimes, like in financial markets. Collective blind spots can lead to disaster, as we saw so vividly depicted in The Big Short.
Exactly. The Big Short is such a stark illustration of how groupthink and these collective blind spots can lead to, well, catastrophic failures.
Like the 2008 crisis?
Precisely. In the run-up to that crisis, there was this pervasive, almost unquestioned assumption that 5% was the number for subprime mortgage bonds.
5% default rate, right, making them look super safe.
Super safe, exactly. It became a kind of party line, as one character put it. Everyone just adhered to it, almost by silent agreement, despite the underlying risks that were actually rapidly deteriorating. Risks that some people, the outsiders, were starting to see clearly.
A party line for an entire industry? That's incredible. How did everyone just miss the obvious dangers? Or ignore them?
Well, it created this situation where characters like Michael Burry, who was betting against the market, started to question if the market participants were delusional or do they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And the answer was complex. Many were probably blinded by their interests, unwilling to see the risks because it meant challenging their own prosperity, their bonuses.
Self-interest is powerful.
Very. Or maybe they simply didn't understand how badly they were being gamed by the larger Wall Street firms, creating these incredibly complex, toxic financial products.
And the watchdogs, the rating agencies.
Even they fell prey to it. They were supposed to be independent arbiters of risk. But one character recalls challenging Fitch, one of the smaller rating agencies, encouraging them to go your own way and be the honest one, make a statement about the true risk.
And what happened?
They just went all pure on him, almost offended by the suggestion they weren't already being honest. The incentives were just too skewed towards giving good ratings.
So it wasn't just individual error. It was systemic blindness, fueled by self-interest, maybe some genuine ignorance, and a collective refusal to critically examine assumptions.
Precisely. It really highlights how when uncertainty is high and the stakes are enormous, a collective belief, even a simple, reassuring but ultimately false number, can be embraced without critical thought.
Leading to massive systemic consequences.
Devastating consequences. The illusion of certainty in this case proved devastating because nobody wanted to be the one to burst the bubble. It's a powerful lesson in how collective delusion can trump individual rationality, especially when almost everyone benefits, at least in the short term, from maintaining the status quo, even if it's built on a house of cards.
So we've seen how dangerous groupthink can be when it blinds entire markets. But what happens when that collective belief isn't just a blind spot, but a powerful, almost tribal force that influences our choices? Expert, you found something really compelling in Cialdini's influence that digs into this, didn't you?
Absolutely. Robert Cialdini's influence introduces us to what he calls the unity rule of influence. And it's far deeper than just superficial similarity.
Unity rule. Okay.
It suggests that people are profoundly inclined to say yes to someone they consider one of them.
One of them.
Yes. And this isn't just about the liking principle, where we agree with people we find agreeable or attractive. This goes beyond that. It taps into something much more fundamental.
So it's not just liking someone, but feeling like they're part of your tribe, your in-group.
Exactly. It's rooted in deep shared identities. Things like race, ethnicity, nationality, family, or political and religious affiliations. The excerpt explicitly states, it's about identities, shared identities. It's about tribe-like categories that individuals use to define themselves and their groups. The difference is profound. You might have a lot in common with a colleague, even like them a lot. But a sibling, despite potentially having fewer surface-level commonalities, is deeply one of you. There's a different kind of bond.
That makes intuitive sense. There's an innate connection there, yeah.
And this feeling is so strong because members of these categories, these tribes, tend to feel at one with or even merged with one another. Cialdini uses that phrase, merged.
Merged, wow.
Yeah. The conduct of one member in such a group can directly influence the self-esteem and identity of other members. It creates an incredibly powerful bond and a fundamental basis for influence.
So if someone from my group does something good, I feel good. And if they do something bad...
You might feel shame or embarrassment, yeah. Cialdini emphasizes that this feeling of at one or merged is far stronger than merely being like someone. He says it's almost like the we is the shared me.
The we is the shared me. I like that.
That's powerful, isn't it? And this deep-seated identification means that appeals based on shared group membership or identity can be far more persuasive. They resonate much deeper than appeals based on mere affinity or surface-level commonality. It helps explain why we're often so easily influenced by those we perceive as our people.
So we've seen how these subtle psychological currents impact individual decisions, collective decisions. But what happens when these decisions scale up even further, to businesses, even entire countries? A country is not a company gives us a really fundamental distinction right off the bat, doesn't it? Highlighting a common and maybe even damaging misconception.
It really does. And what's crucial here, and maybe a bit surprising to some, is how often business-level thinking gets misapplied to national economies. This can lead to really flawed policies and conclusions.
Oh, so?
Well, Paul Krigman, in his work, constantly reminds us that while a company might expand capacity to export more and import less, with the clear aim of increasing profits or market share.
The standard business goal.
Right. But the economics for a country are fundamentally different. For a nation, the overall balance of payments, that is, the difference between its total sales to foreigners and its total purchases from foreigners, must always, by definition, balance out to zero. It's a basic national accounting identity.
Wait, zero. Always zero. So if the U.S. buys, say, a ton of goods from Japan and sells less back, how does that balance out? It sounds like there'd be a huge deficit.
But that's only looking at one part of the equation, the trade account. Think of it like this. A country's total financial ledger with the rest of the world always has to balance, just like your personal bank account has to balance when you account for everything.
Okay.
So if the U.S. buys a new car from Germany that's an import, money goes out.
Uh-huh.
But to balance that transaction, Germany, or maybe a German investor, has to do something with those dollars. They have to either buy something from the U.S., maybe soybeans, maybe software. That's an export. Money comes back in.
Right.
Or they have to invest that money here in the U.S. That investment could be buying U.S. government bonds,
Yeah.
or buying U.S. real estate, or even buying ownership stakes in American companies. That's the capital account side of the equation.
Okay, so a trade deficit just means we're running a capital surplus. Foreigners are investing more here than we are investing there.
Precisely. And vice versa. A trade deficit or surplus must be matched by a corresponding opposite imbalance in the capital account. It's a continuous, dynamic balancing act.
So it's not inherently good or bad, just two sides of the same coin.
It's more complex than just good or bad. It reflects flows of goods and capital. A country running a trade deficit isn't necessarily losing money in the way a company loses money. It simply means foreigners are choosing to invest more in that country, or that country is borrowing more, than the country is investing abroad.
That's a really core economic principle that often gets completely overlooked in public discourse, especially when trade deficits become political footballs.
Absolutely. Understanding this distinction is just crucial for accurate economic analysis and avoiding those flawed country as a company metaphors.
Okay, that distinction is vital. Now let's bring it back to the business level. Many companies find themselves stuck in what's often called a red ocean, right? Fighting tooth and nail over existing, often shrinking demand.
Yeah, fierce competition.
Blue Ocean strategy gives us a powerful framework for escaping this bloody competition. What's the core idea there? How do you get out of the red ocean?
The core idea behind Blue Ocean strategy is, well, revolutionary in its simplicity, really. It's don't compete where everyone else is competing. Instead, create uncontested market space.
Uncontested market space, a blue ocean.
Exactly. Rather than constantly benchmarking your competitors, trying to outmuscle them for a bigger slice of an existing pie, the goal is to make the competition irrelevant altogether.
Make them irrelevant. How?
By growing demand, by discovering or creating entirely new customer segments, rather than just battling over the current customers in a saturated market. It's about value innovation, creating a leap in value for buyers and your company, thereby opening up new and uncontested market space.
So it's about finding entirely new needs or maybe entirely new ways to meet existing needs, rather than just doing what everyone else does, but slightly better or maybe cheaper.
Exactly. It's innovating value in a way that truly differentiates you. It allows you to swim in that blue ocean of new, uncontested demand, rather than getting bloody in the red ocean stained by the competition.
Can you give an example?
Sure, the classic one is Cirque du Soleil. They didn't try to compete head-on with traditional circuses on things like animal acts or star clowns.
Right.
Instead, they created a whole new market space by blending elements of circus with theater. They targeted an entirely new audience, adults, corporate clients, people who appreciated artistic performance and were willing to pay premium prices, unlike traditional circus goers.
So they created a blue ocean where none really existed before and made traditional circus competition kind of irrelevant to them.
Precisely. They redefined the industry boundaries.
And sometimes to achieve that kind of breakthrough, companies have to do things that seem to go against traditional business logic, which brings us to blitzscaling, right? This isn't just about growing fast. It's about a deliberate, calculated approach to hypergrowth, even if it feels, well, kind of crazy.
That's exactly it. Blitzscaling involves purposefully and intentionally doing things that don't make sense according to traditional business thinking.
Like what? What kind of things?
Well, it can include taking on additional risk and discomfort, like burning through cash at a high rate, maybe sacrificing short-term efficiency or even quality control, to avoid what they see as the even greater risk of losing if your competition blitzscales before you do.
So speed is paramount. Getting big fast is the goal.
In certain types of markets, yes. It's a recognition that in some hyper-competitive, often winner-take-all markets, being first to achieve critical mass or network effects often trumps being the absolute best product initially. First is best can sometimes beat best is best.
So you deliberately choose to sacrifice efficiency, maybe even comfort, for sheer speed, because the bigger risk isn't making mistakes, it's being too slow.
That's the core logic. It's a strategic embrace of chaos, in a way, all aimed at achieving market dominance before anyone else can.
So it's not just growing fast, it's growing faster than anyone else, almost at any cost in the short term, to lock in that market position.
Exactly. A prime example given is Airbnb's decision to expand aggressively into European markets very early on.
Risky move?
Hugely risky. It could easily have overstretched the company, potentially damaged its core business, especially since they had a strong copycat competitor, Wimdu, already active there.
Right.
Yet, that risky decision ultimately proved to be the right one. It allowed them to secure their global footprint before rivals could really gain traction.
But if you're moving that fast, taking on risk, how do you avoid just, crashing and burning? How do you track progress?
That's where metrics become absolutely critical, and you have to be careful not to fall for vanity metrics.
Vanity metrics, like what?
Numbers that look good on the surface, maybe get you good press, but don't actually reflect the key drivers of growth or sustainability. Ev Williams, who founded Blogger, Twitter, and Medium, shared a story about Twitter's early days. The team got really caught up in tracking API call volume.
API calls.
Yeah, the press loved it. It sounded impressive. But it turned out that metric didn't actually correlate with business success or real user engagement. It was a feel-good number, not a meaningful growth driver.
So if you're blitzscaling, how do you know if you're actually succeeding or just spinning your wheels really, really fast?
That's why you need to be incredibly disciplined about identifying and tracking your true key metrics. On the flip side, Mariam Nafisi of Minted stressed the value of creating consistent questions from the beginning and to not change them over time.
Consistent question.
Yeah, using metrics like Net Promoter Score, that would you recommend us question. It's proven to be a pretty reliable indicator of customer loyalty and future growth. Tracking that consistently allows for meaningful comparisons over time.
So it keeps you focused on what truly matters for sustained growth, rather than getting distracted by numbers that just inflate the ego.
Exactly. It's about knowing your real North Star, especially amidst the chaos and temptation of rapid expansion.
Speaking of strategies that seem counterintuitive but prove incredibly powerful, Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, he exemplified a fascinating dual approach, didn't he? His company, as Sam Walton Made in America reveals, absolutely blitzscaled in its own way, but it was driven by this unique blend of what the book calls the personality of a promoter, but the soul of an operator.
That combination is precisely what made Walmart so formidable, I think.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, Walton had this folksy, sometimes almost eccentric promoter persona.
Like doing the hula on Wall Street?
Exactly, stuff like that.
Yeah.
The book says Walmart flew under everybody's radar until we were too far along to catch, partly because their unorthodox style confused competitors. People saw the donkey rides in the parking lot, the cheap prices, and maybe assumed they were just a little fly-by-night operation, not taking them seriously as a long-term threat.
So that public image was almost like camouflage, allowing them to operate under the radar while they built scale.
In a way, yes. But underneath that promoter exterior, Walton had the soul of an operator. He was absolutely obsessed with the nitty-gritty details of running efficient stores. Cost control, logistics, inventory management.
The boring stuff.
The stuff that actually makes the business work. He famously treated competitors like Kmart as a kind of laboratory. He said he spent a heck of a lot of my time wandering through their stores, talking to their people and trying to figure out how they did things.
Learning from the competition directly.
Constantly.
Yeah.
But his focus wasn't just on raw growth for its own sake. It was about becoming the very best operators, building a foundational excellence in execution that rivals simply didn't perceive or couldn't match until it was way too late.
So it was relentless internal focus combined with maybe a distracting external image.
It's a powerful lesson, I think, in combining that outward-facing energy with an inward, relentless dedication to operational mastery, making things work well, then better, than the best they possibly could year after year.
Okay, stepping back to a broader perspective again, this really highlights the importance of deeply understanding the competitive landscape, anticipating reactions. Expert, how does Michael Porter's competitive strategy deepen our understanding here, on that grander scale?
Porter's work is foundational here. He emphasizes that understanding your rivals isn't just about knowing their products or market share, it's about understanding their intentions, their goals.
Knowing their goals helps predict their moves.
Exactly. Knowing a competitor's goals helps a firm predict how they might respond to your moves and helps you interpret the seriousness of their initiatives. For instance, if a competitor makes a strategic move that directly addresses one of their central goals, maybe reclaiming lost market share in their core business or hitting a key profitability target,
Hmm.
that move is not a casual matter. It's much more likely to provoke a fierce, determined retaliation from them. You should expect a strong response.
So if they make a move that threatens their bread and butter, watch out. But if they're just dabbling in a new peripheral area,
The reaction might be much weaker or slower. You're trying to get inside their heads, understand their priorities. Porter also stresses that understanding the corporate parent is crucial. Will the parent company seriously back a business unit's initiatives or retaliations? Or is it just a pet project?
so you need to gauge the level of commitment behind the move.
Precisely. Is this competitor's action part of a fleeting trend? Or is it a fully backed, maybe even existential play from their parent company? It's about playing strategic chess, not just checkers. Anticipating multiple moves ahead and understanding the motivations and constraints behind each piece on the board.
And in this strategic game, what about the customer? We can get so focused on competitors, we forget who we're actually serving. Marketing myopia reminds us of a fundamental trap here, doesn't it? What is that myopia?
The core message of Marketing Myopia, written by Theodore Levitt way back, is still incredibly relevant. It argues that companies become vulnerable, myopic, by focusing too narrowly on their products or on the efficiencies of mass production. Instead of focusing on the evolving needs and desires of their customers, they get obsessed with what they sell, not why customers are buying it in the first place. What job is the customer hiring the product to do?
So the classic example, people don't buy quarter-inch drill bits, they buy quarter-inch holes.
Exactly. That's the mindset shift. An oil company might focus obsessively on finding and drilling more oil. But the customer's underlying need is energy or transportation. And that need could eventually be met much better by solar power or electric vehicles or something completely new from entirely different sectors.
So this product-centric view can blind a company to disruptive shifts happening just outside their immediate industry.
Totally. It allows nimble newcomers who are focused on solving the underlying customer problem in novel ways to steal their market share, often by offering alternative solutions to the same fundamental need.
And Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm adds another layer to this, particularly when trying to bring innovative products to a wider audience. He talks about pragmatist customers in the mainstream market. What do they want?
Moore makes it really clear that these pragmatist customers, who make up the early majority in the mainstream market, are fundamentally different from the early adopters who love new tech for its own sake. Pragmatists are incredibly risk-averse.
Okay.
They don't just want an innovative piece of technology. They want a complete, reliable, whole product solution, something readily available and fully supported. They aren't interested in being beta testers or assembling solutions themselves.
They want the finished article plug and play.
Exactly. They fear missing components, hassle, incompatibility. Think about a loyal Microsoft Office user being reluctant to switch to Google Apps back in the day. It wasn't just about the core software features.
What else was it then?
It was the whole ecosystem. Office had deeply integrated support, training resources, vast file compatibility, a huge network of users. It felt safe and complete. Pragmatists want that assurance and completeness. They don't want to become system integrators for their own solutions. They want to buy a finished solution to their problem from a vendor they trust.
This leads really naturally to a critical point about innovation and disruption, explored so well in The Innovator's Dilemma. This is where established, successful companies often stumble, isn't it? Even when they seem to be doing everything right, according to traditional management principles.
Indeed. Clayton Christensen's foundational work here is so important. He highlights that disruptive technologies often initially underperform the current technology on the attributes that matter most to mainstream customers.
So they're not actually better for the company's best customers, at least not at first.
Exactly. They might be simpler, cheaper, more convenient, or smaller, but they don't meet the performance requirements of the existing, profitable customer base. And this creates a huge dilemma for incumbent companies. Their best customers don't want the disruptive product yet, so it's very hard to justify investing heavily in it. It looks like a distraction from serving the core market.
That's the trap. So how do you successfully commercialize these potentially disruptive technologies?
Christensen argues the key is not to try and force them onto your existing customer base too early. Instead, you must find different customers. New markets or niche applications where the new technology's unique attributes, maybe its cheapness, its simplicity, its convenience, are actually valued. even if it underperforms on the traditional metrics that your mainstream customers care about.
Can you give us an example from the sources?
Yeah, the text uses the example of Micropolis's 3.5-inch disk drive. Initially, it was smaller, but had much less capacity than the larger 5.25-inch drives that mainstream computer customers needed.
So the big customers weren't interested.
Right. Micropolis only found real success with the 3.5-inch drive later, when the technology had improved enough to meet the capacity needs of existing customers. Or, crucially, when entirely new markets emerged, like portable computers, where the smaller size and lower power consumption were more important than raw capacity.
Ah, okay. So it found a new job to do for a new set of customers first.
Exactly. It underscores that understanding the market for the disruption, finding that initial foothold where its unique advantages shine, is paramount. You often have to be willing to let go of your existing mental models of what good performance means and embrace a new definition of value for a potentially entirely new set of customers.
So whether you're building a massive company, launching a disruptive product, or even just crafting a marketing campaign, taking a risk seems inherent. And sometimes the biggest rewards come from the boldest gambles. Breakthrough Advertising talks about something called the creative gamble in headlines. What's that about?
And it truly is a gamble, but potentially a very high-impact one, especially in advertising. This technique involves crafting headlines that deliberately don't mention the product or its brand name or even its performance directly.
So, what do they do?
The headline's sole purpose is pure intrigue. It's designed to grasp the attention of the prospect and impel him to read on into the body copy where the actual sales message is delivered.
So it's a hook, pure and simple, designed just to get them past the scroll or the page turn, like a cliffhanger for an ad.
Precisely. It's a high-stakes play because you're completely foregoing those traditional, benefit-driven or product-focused headlines. As the source says, if he fails in his gamble, he has wasted his page. You get nothing.
Big risk.
Big risk. But if he succeeds, he has doubled and tripled the effectiveness of his ad because you've captured attention you otherwise wouldn't have. It's a high-reward, high-risk approach, really, to cutting through the clutter in a crowded market where just stating what you sell might not be enough anymore.
So it demands a deep understanding of human psychology, curiosity, plus real creativity, and I guess a lot of confidence that the rest of the ad can actually deliver once you've hooked them.
Absolutely, because if that headline doesn't grab them, they're gone. You've lost your shot.
Okay, so beyond these market forces and strategic gambles, it's ultimately the people, right? And their leadership. That's what truly drives success within any organization. Built to Last offers a really powerful contrast in leadership philosophies here, defining the very essence of what makes some companies endure.
It really does. The book draws this sharp contrast between Walmart's approach under Sam Walton, which they describe as a clock-building orientation,
Clock building,
meaning focusing on creating robust systems, repeatable processes, and cultivating its people, building an organization that could run itself, that could endure. David Glass, who followed Walton, noted, Walmart associates will find a way, and our people are relentless. That indicates this deep trust in the capabilities and ingenuity of their employees, and a commitment to creating an organization that could sustain itself far beyond any single leader's tenure. It was about building a lasting institution, like building a clock that keeps ticking.
Okay, so Walmart built a system, a clock, that could run without its founder. How did that contrast with Ames?
Ames, on the other hand, is presented as exemplifying a blind, obsessive pursuit of raw growth for growth's sake. Just chasing numbers, acquiring other companies without that solid underlying philosophy or the necessary infrastructure, or crucially, that deep investment in its people and culture.
So short-term expansion versus long-term institution building.
Exactly. It underscores the profound importance of having a long-term, people-centric vision over just chasing expansion targets. Enduring companies build clocks. They don't just rely on charismatic time tellers. They create systems and cultures that can adapt and thrive independently.
That raises a really important question. What kind of leadership fosters that long-term vision, that commitment, especially when things inevitably go wrong? Expert, it sounds like extreme ownership has a very clear, maybe even stark answer.
It does, and it's a completely non-negotiable one in that framework. Leaders must take extreme ownership. That means accepting full responsibility for everything that happens within their sphere of influence and never, ever blaming external factors.
Never, even if it seems like it was an external factor.
The principle is, if it affects your mission, it's your problem to solve. The book gives this powerful example of a chief technology officer facing a disastrous product rollout. What did he do? He exhibited a defensive demeanor and was just full of excuses.
Oh,
Yeah, he blamed the market, blamed his personnel, blamed communication issues, even blamed senior executives. This is precisely what extreme ownership projects. A true leader, in this view, accepts full responsibility for everything in their domain, the successes and the failures, regardless of external circumstances, and then works relentlessly to find solutions rather than pointing fingers.
so it's about owning the entire problem, not just your specific piece of it, and focusing on solutions.
Precisely. Furthermore, the book stresses that senior leaders must clearly explain why, explain how their role contributes to big picture success, because this connection is not intuitive and never as obvious to the rank-and-file employees as leaders might assume.
People need to see how their work fits in.
Absolutely. Regular, ideally face-to-face communication is paramount for this, leading down the chain of command, helping team members connect their daily tasks to the bigger strategic goals, making them feel like a vital part of something larger.
And empowering them, too.
Yes, that's crucial. John C. Maxwell in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership emphasizes that secure leaders are able to give themselves away. They give others credit, they empower their teams. There's a great quote from Admiral James B. Stockdale in there, too. Leadership must be based on goodwill. What we need for leaders are men of heart who are so helpful that they, in effect, do away with the need of their jobs.
Wow. Make yourself redundant through helping others succeed.
Exactly. But Stockdale adds, but leaders like that are never out of a job, never out of followers. It highlights that true authority, lasting authority, comes from empowering others and genuinely serving the team. That builds a virtuous cycle of trust and loyalty.
That idea of leaders empowering others, really wanting to see them grow, is echoed so vividly in Howard Schultz's philosophy at Starbucks, isn't it? As detailed in Pour Your Heart Into It. His whole approach to building the company seemed deeply rooted in the belief that employee well-being and engagement were fundamental.
Schultz's leadership style was genuinely transformative for the time, especially in retail. His approach to hiring and delegation was legendary. He'd often tell new leaders, I hired you because you're smarter than I am, now go and prove it. Just like that.
That's real delegation, real trust.
Absolutely. Delegating authority clearly, fostering a culture of trust and high expectations. But it went much deeper than just tasks and authority. Starbucks, under his leadership, prioritized creating an environment where employees found real emotional benefits beyond just the stock options or paycheck.
Emotional benefits, like what?
Things like camaraderie among coworkers, genuine interaction with customers, the pride in a new skill and knowledge, feeling respect from managers, and just the fundamental satisfaction of working for a company that seemed to treat them well as partners.
So he explicitly linked profit to purpose, and especially to employee well-being. He didn't see them as separate things you trade off.
Not at all. Schultz firmly believed you can't really do one without the other, meaning profitability and employee well-being are inextricably linked. They're mutually reinforcing. He fundamentally understood that happy, engaged employees translate directly into better customer service, a stronger brand, and ultimately better financial results.
It seems obvious now, maybe, but it wasn't always the standard view.
Not at all. And his advice to dream great dreams and be bold, it further underscores that visionary, people-first aspect of his leadership. He encouraged continuous innovation and a commitment to a purpose beyond just profit. He really proved, I think, that a company could care deeply for its people and still achieve phenomenal global success.
This concept of empowering employees, fostering a strong culture where people feel valued, is also a key tenet of Blue Ocean leadership, which offers a more structured approach to engaging employees in leadership change. How does this methodology actually get people on board with new leadership directives or styles? Because change is hard.
Blue Ocean leadership is really quite brilliant because it tackles that critical challenge of buy-in head-on. Resistance to change is often the biggest hurdle. It's 4 steps. Start with getting everyone to understand the current reality of leadership within the organization.
Seeing things as they really are.
Exactly. Gaining a common, clear perspective on what leaders are actually doing with their time and energy versus what they think they're doing or should be doing. But here's the crucial part. The to-be leadership profiles, the desired future state of leadership, what effective leadership should look like, those are generated with the employee's own input.
So the employees help define what good leadership looks like for them.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's a co-creation process. And that is incredibly powerful because it leads naturally to confidence in the changes made and much deeper engagement. People feel a strong sense of ownership over what their leaders are doing and why, because they help define it.
So it's not just another mandate coming down from the top, but a collaborative vision that the employees themselves help craft. That makes so much sense for reducing resistance and increasing acceptance.
Exactly. And this approach also makes the transformation feel easier for the leaders themselves because they are simply changing the tasks they carry out, the activities they focus on, rather than feeling like they have to fundamentally alter who they are as people or break long-held ingrained habits.
It reframes change from maybe a personal identity crisis to a more practical adjustment of responsibilities and focus.
Yes. It makes it more scalable and less likely to meet with a deep-seated resistance. By involving employees from the ground up, Blue Ocean leadership aims to ensure that the new leadership behaviors aren't just mandated, but are genuinely embraced and enacted by the people closest to the work. And that, in turn, unlocks that sleeping potential and creates more lasting, meaningful change.
But even with great leadership, even with buy-in, teams can face significant challenges. Dysfunction happens. The 5 dysfunctions of a team highlights the leader's crucial role in navigating these, particularly when it comes to things like accountability and decision-making. What's one of the biggest hurdles for leaders here?
One of the biggest hurdles, and something Patrick Lencioni really stresses, is that the leader must be comfortable with the prospect of making a decision that ultimately turns out to be wrong.
Comfortable with being wrong. That's tough for a leader.
It is tough. But in today's fast-paced environment, waiting for perfect information or trying to achieve absolute consensus before acting can be paralyzing. It leads to analysis paralysis. A leader needs the courage to constantly push for closure around issues, make the call, and adhere to team set schedules rather than placing too high a premium on certainty or consensus. It's often about progress over perfection, action over endless deliberation.
So a leader who's too afraid to be wrong or who insists on everyone agreeing first can actually paralyze the entire team.
Exactly. That fear of error or that desire for unanimous agreement leads to indecision, frustration, and missed opportunities. And importantly, Lencioni points out that accountability within a team relies heavily on a clear sense of what is expected.
Clarity first.
Absolutely. People cannot realistically be held accountable for something they never truly bought into, or for expectations that were never made explicit and agreed upon. The leader's role is to ensure that clarity exists, making sure everyone understands the objectives, the standards, and their specific part in achieving them. Without that foundational clarity, accountability just crumbles into finger-pointing or resentment.
And what about managing the relationships within that team, particularly the relationship with the person above you, your boss? Managing your boss suggests we often miss the mark here, maybe viewing the relationship through too narrow a lens.
Most definitely. The authors argue that many managers either avoid trying to manage his or her relationship with a boss or manages it ineffectively. Why? Because they don't recognize the fundamental mutual dependence between two fallible human beings.
Mutual dependence. So it's not just about taking orders.
Not at all. We often treat our boss as simply the person who gives us orders and evaluates us, or we assume any friction is just a personality conflict. But that's usually a dangerous oversimplification.
So it's not just a one-way street of reporting up, but a genuine partnership. Or it should be.
Ideally, yes. A productive working relationship. The subordinate often holds unrealistic assumptions or expectations about the nature of this relationship. They might fail to see that the boss, too, has constraints, pressures, blind spots, their own goals they're trying to meet.
You're a human too.
Exactly. So effectively, managing upward involves actively working to understand your boss's goals, their pressures, their preferred working style, their strengths, and critically, their weaknesses or blind spots. Then, you proactively find ways to align your work with their objectives, keep them informed, support their success, while also managing their expectations of you.
So it's an active, ongoing process.
Very much so. It requires communication, understanding, reliability, and recognizing that both parties are interdependent for shared success. It's rarely just about personalities clashing.
This brings us neatly to Peter Drucker, often called the father of modern management. Across his works like Managing Oneself, The Effective Executive, and The Practice of Management, he offers such a profound advice, not just for managing others, but crucially for managing oneself, especially in the age of the knowledge worker. What's his core message about self-management?
Drucker argues really powerfully that managing oneself demands that each knowledge worker think and behave like a chief executive officer.
Like the CEO of Me, Inc.
Essentially, yes. Taking personal responsibility for your contributions, your professional growth, your relationships, and your overall impact. You are in charge of your own career trajectory and effectiveness.
And a key part of that is knowing yourself, right? Your strengths.
Absolutely central. A key principle he advocates is to waste as little effort as possible on improving areas of low competence. Instead, you should concentrate your energy, your resources on making a competent person into a star performer. It's a very counterintuitive point for many of us still today.
It really goes against that conventional wisdom of always trying to fix your weaknesses, doesn't it? We spend so much time on that.
We do. But Drucker states pretty bluntly it takes far more energy and work to improve from incompetence to mediocrity than it takes to improve from first-rate performance to excellence. So focus your energy where you can achieve true excellence on your strengths. It's about leveraging what you're naturally good at rather than just shoring up weaknesses to become merely adequate. That's where you create truly exceptional value.
Makes sense. What else did Drucker emphasize for effectiveness?
Well, for effective decision-making, he argued that an executive must organize disagreement.
Organize disagreement, not avoid it.
No, actively solicit it. This isn't about fostering conflict for its own sake, but about ensuring that different viewpoints and potential alternatives are surfaced and seriously considered before a decision is made. This practice protects against flawed ideas, groupthink. It provides valuable alternatives if the first plan fails, and it forces the imagination.
So it's not just hearing different opinions, but truly digging into why those opinions exist, understanding the reasoning behind the dissent.
Exactly. The effective decision maker, Drucker said, doesn't assume one side is right and the other wrong. They start with the commitment to find out why people disagree. This deep inquiry, this exploration of different perspectives, leads to much better, more robust decisions in the long run.
What else? Communication.
Crucial. Drucker stresses that executives must ensure both their action plans and their information needs are understood by colleagues, superiors, and subordinates. It requires proactive, clear communication up, down, and sideways.
And that tension between short-term and long-term.
He framed that brilliantly. He noted that the constant tension between short-term results and long-term growth isn't primarily an economic disagreement. It's fundamentally a value conflict. It requires clear leadership on the organization's core priorities and its fundamental mission. What do we truly value most?
Ray Dalio, in Principles, Life, and Work, builds on this idea of embracing disagreement for better outcomes, doesn't he? Even if it feels really uncomfortable. What's his practical approach when people are genuinely stuck in a disagreement?
Dalio, who's famous for his culture of radical transparency at Bridgewater, has some very direct, practical advice here. When disagreeing about something important, he suggests you should slowly, painstakingly work through it until mutual understanding is reached, rather than just giving up or agreeing to disagree prematurely.
But that can be awkward, right? Especially if egos are involved?
It can be very awkward. So he offers a specific phrase, a way to navigate that awkwardness. One person might say something like, look, let's agree that I am a dumb shit, but I still need to make sense of this, so let's move slowly to make sure that happens.
Chuckles, that's blunt, but I can see how it would work.
It diffuses tension, right? It shows humility, acknowledges you might be wrong, but crucially, it prioritizes achieving genuine understanding over just being right or winning the argument. It keeps the conversation focused on sense-making.
That's a brave thing to say, but yeah, it could disarm people and help get to the root of the issue.
And what about performance reviews? Most people absolutely dread those. Dalio has a different take there too, doesn't he?
He does. He advocates for constant, transparent feedback throughout the year. His view is that formal performance reviews should contain few surprises, because any issues or patterns should have already been discussed openly and honestly as they arose.
Continuous feedback, not saving it all up.
Exactly. And for the reviews themselves, the process should start by looking at specific cases, look for patterns, and crucially, the manager and employee need to get in sync by reviewing the evidence together. What actually happened? What does the data show?
So it's collaborative and evidence-based.
Yes. This approach ensures that any shortcomings or areas for improvement would have already been addressed on a case-by-case basis through ongoing probing and discussion. It emphasizes truthfulness and transparency as foundational for individual growth and continuous performance improvement, rather than making the review a single, high-stakes, often anxiety-provoking event. Okay, shifting to our own personal productivity and focus now. In a world full of distractions, HBR's 10 must-reads on managing yourself and Cal Newport's deep work offer some really practical wisdom. How can we beat that pervasive feeling of fragmentation and distraction?
Well, from the HBR collection, the concept of managing energy, not just time, is absolutely key. We have finite energy.
Energy management, not time management.
Right. It's about managing your physical, mental, and emotional energy throughout the day to perform at your best. The sources suggest that taking intermittent breaks, even just for several minutes, can lead to higher and more sustainable performance, but only if those breaks truly allow you to disengage and change channels mentally.
So not just switching from email to Slack, but actually stepping away.
Exactly. It could mean getting up to talk to a colleague about something completely non-work related, or listening to a short burst of music, or just stepping away from your screen entirely to stretch or look out the window. It's about real disengagement and renewal.
And tailoring your environment.
Yes, definitely. Tailor your work environment to maximize your mental functioning. If listening to music with earphones helps you focus, do it. If you think best while standing up, get a standing desk. If using fidget toys helps manage restless energy, use them. It's about finding what works for you to create an optimal state for concentration.
So these seemingly small strategies are really about combating what some call the ADT devil, that attention deficit trait that modern life seems to induce, making us constantly jump between tabs, check notifications, get sucked into minor urgent-looking tasks. It's about consciously building walls against those digital distractions.
Exactly. And Cal Newport's deep work takes this concept even further, particularly with his discussion of the monastic philosophy of deep work scheduling.
Monastic sounds intense.
It is. It's an approach that aims to maximize deep efforts by eliminating or radically minimizing shallow obligations. It's really geared towards individuals whose primary professional goal requires intense, focused concentration. Think writers, programmers, scientists, strategists.
People whose success comes from doing this one thing exceptionally well.
Precisely. The monastic approach advocates for creating large, uninterrupted blocks of time dedicated solely to cognitively demanding, focused work. This requires aggressively cutting out or batching shallow tasks like email, meetings, social media, and other distractions.
So it's a powerful call to consciously design your life and work schedule for concentrated effort rather than letting your attention be fragmented by the constant onslaught of the shallow.
Exactly. It's about taking back control of your attention, recognizing its value, and structuring your work to leverage it effectively for high-value output.
Okay, so we've journeyed through individual decisions, corporate strategies, leadership, team dynamics, personal effectiveness. Now let's zoom out one last time to the broader implications. How do these principles apply when we think about building wealth, understanding history, and maybe maintaining the ethical foundations that shape our world?
Indeed. And looking first at wealth accumulation, The Millionaire Next Door offers such a profound and still very counterintuitive insight into how people actually become truly rich. It challenges those common media portrayals of affluence, doesn't it?
It really does. Flashy cars, big houses.
Right. The book argues that the most prodigious accumulators of wealth, the people who build significant net worth, aren't necessarily the highest income earners who flaunt their money. Instead, they, and crucially often their spouses too, are remarkably frugal, disciplined savers and investors.
Frugal, even if they earn a lot.
Especially if they earn a lot. The authors underscore that high income alone, what they call playing great offense in the game of wealth, simply isn't enough. You absolutely need great defense too, meaning disciplined spending habits, to actually build substantial net worth over time. It's fundamentally about living below your means, consistently, often to a degree that might seem extreme to others.
So the flashy spenders we often see portrayed as rich might not actually have much underlying wealth. It's the quiet accumulators, living modestly relative to their income.
Precisely. They're often invisible millionaires because they don't live the stereotypical rich lifestyle.
Yeah.
They prioritize financial independence over displaying status.
And how do they invest?
Interestingly, the book notes these millionaires often astutely allocate their time so that they can plan their business and personal investing at the same time. And crucially, they tend to leverage their existing knowledge.
How so?
For example, an auctioneer specializing in commercial real estate often invests heavily in that same sector. They use their considerable expertise, their insider knowledge, to identify valuable opportunities that others without that specific domain expertise might completely miss.
So stick to what you know.
It seems to be a common thread. This approach of aligning investment with one's professional knowledge allows them to be their own shrewd investment analysts, in a way, which is often a far more effective strategy than blindly chasing hot trends or relying solely on external advice in unfamiliar domains. It's about smart, focused effort and disciplined resource allocation, both of money and time channeled into areas where they genuinely possess an edge.
Sticking with investing, Benjamin Graham's The Intelligent Investor and Howard Marks's The Most Important Thing Illuminated offer such a timeless perspective on risk and market behavior. It really stands in stark contrast to the short-term speculation we see so much of, especially in today's volatile markets.
They absolutely do. Graham, who is Warren Buffett's mentor, famously advises that the intelligent investor should focus on pricing, that is, buying stocks or securities only when they are quoted significantly below their calculated fair intrinsic value, and then perhaps selling them when they rise substantially above that value.
Pricing, not timing.
Exactly. This is explicitly contrasted with timing the market, that generally futile endeavor to anticipate short-term market movements up or down. Graham emphasizes that focusing on fundamental value and always demanding a margin of safety, buying something for significantly less than you think it's conservatively worth, is far more reliable and prudent for the long-term investor.
And Howard Marks echoes that.
Very much so. In The Most Important Thing Illuminated, Marx constantly stresses the need for a healthy respect for risk, and crucially, an awareness that we don't know what the future holds. We simply cannot predict the future with certainty.
So accept uncertainty.
Yes. We must view the future as a range of possibilities, a probability distribution, and therefore invest defensively. Acknowledge the inherent uncertainty rather than pretending we can predict the unpredictable. Prepare, don't predict.
So it's about being prepared for a range of outcomes rather than betting everything on one specific forecast being right. And that naturally leads towards a contrarian approach sometimes, doesn't it? If you're focused on value when others are focused on momentum.
Indeed. Marx also highlights the importance and the difficulty of being a contrarian. He argues that the best opportunities are usually found among things most others won't do.
Buying when there's blood in the streets.
That's the idea. It often means contrarians have to be willing to catch falling knives, as the saying goes. Buying assets when the herd is panicking and selling, precisely because the market has likely undervalued those assets based on fear and emotion, rather than a rational assessment of intrinsic value.
That takes immense discipline and courage.
Absolutely. It requires an independent mind, rigorous analysis, and the courage to go against popular opinion, often when it feels most uncomfortable and lonely. It's fundamentally about buying when things are cheap and unloved, not when they're popular and expensive. It makes investing a thoughtful, patient, business-like process rather than a frenzied race based on tips and emotion.
This concept of understanding underlying value and being wary of popular opinion or entrenched beliefs extends beyond investing, too, into broader economic and political theory. Keynes, for example, in The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, a book that revolutionized economics, he highlights the profound challenge of shifting those entrenched beliefs, even among highly educated professionals.
That's a fascinating historical parallel to think about. Keynes explicitly states right at the beginning of his book that it's chiefly addressed to his fellow economists, and his goal, to persuade them to re-examine critically certain of their basic assumptions.
Assumptions he himself held previously.
Yes. He notes that he himself held with conviction for many years the theories which I now attack. That's a powerful testament, isn't it? To the sheer difficulty of overcoming cognitive inertia and challenging the established orthodoxy, even for brilliant minds operating within their own field of expertise.
So even Keynes, who fundamentally changed economic thought, admits he had to break free from his own deeply ingrained, long-held beliefs. That's quite something.
It is. Keynes argues that the fundamental error in the classical theory he was challenging was to be found not in the superstructure, meaning the logical development of the theory, but in a lack of clearness and of generality in the premises.
Yeah.
The starting points were flawed.
The foundational assumptions were shaky.
Exactly. And he knew it would take highly abstract argument and also by much controversy to challenge this classical theory, because its logical consistency seemed sound, even if it was built upon those flawed foundations. This historical example just shows how, even in highly intellectual fields, deeply held assumptions can prevent new insights from gaining traction. Breaking through often requires a fundamental reevaluation of first principles, not just tweaking the existing framework. It's a reminder that truly transformative ideas often begin by questioning what everyone else accepts as unquestionable.
And turning to political economy, Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, another pivotal work, makes a very strong argument about the inherent tension between central planning and individual liberty, doesn't it?
Hayek's arguments in that book are unequivocally against central economic planning. He strongly advocates for liberal political and economic institutions, meaning free markets, rule of law, limited government, as the most likely, perhaps the only way to preserve democracy and individual freedom in the long run.
Why did he see central planning as such a threat?
He emphasized the critical need for constitutional limits, specifically to protect individuals against what he termed the tyranny of the majority. His central premise is that when the state takes on the enormous task of centrally planning economic life, even if it starts with the best intentions, it inevitably leads down a path toward the suppression of individual freedoms.
How so?
Because the greater the extent of state planning, the more arbitrary power necessarily accrues to the state officials making those plans. Democratic processes, individual choices, dissenting opinions, they inevitably get sidelined in the name of the plan. He viewed this as a very dangerous, slippery slope, ultimately leading society toward totalitarianism or serfdom by systematically eroding the very foundations of individual choice, economic liberty, and political freedom. It remains a powerful and often intensely debated warning about the potential trade-offs between economic control and personal liberty.
But history also shows us the dark side of power, even when individuals claim to be acting for progress or against corruption. Robert Caro's The Power Broker, detailing Robert Moses's unparalleled influence in shaping modern New York City, is just a stunning illustration of this.
Caro's meticulously researched biography of Robert Moses is an absolute masterclass in how power can be acquired and wielded without accountability, even when ostensibly used for the public good, like building parks and highways. Moses, Caro argues, though he arguably replaced corruption in New York City with a more efficient, perhaps meritocratic system for building public works, he was arguably worse than corruption for the democratic processes.
Worse than corruption? How could that be?
Because, Carroll writes, Moses despised its opinion, the public's opinion. Why? Because its votes had not put him in office, and its votes could not remove him from office. He accumulated immense power through a complex web of appointed positions on public authorities, making him largely immune to direct electoral accountability.
So he didn't need to listen to the people because the voters couldn't actually fire him. How did he impose his will then, when there was opposition?
His method for imposing his will and bypassing public sentiment was remarkably effective and frankly quite chilling when you read about it. Whenever anyone dared to question his plans, maybe a local official raising concerns about the lack of parks in a neighborhood or favoring libraries over yet another highway, Moses would initiate a powerful counter-campaign. He would essentially generate a flood of phone calls and telegrams, often channeled through his vast network of agencies, contractors, unions, and other allies, all saying the same thing: you were holding up progress.
Wow. He manufactured pressure.
He manufactured an artificial groundswell of public pressure, making it seem as if anyone questioning his vision was an enemy of progress, jobs, the future. This tactic successfully cowed opposition time and time again. It created this false narrative that stifled genuine democratic debate and public input, allowing him to build his massive infrastructure projects while systematically eroding the responsiveness of government to the actual needs and desires of the citizens. It's just a profound cautionary lesson in how power, once consolidated and unchecked, can manipulate and ultimately undermine democratic processes.
On the other hand, turning to a much more positive example of individual impact, the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin provides such a classic personal example of self-made success through sheer diligence and self-improvement. It's kind of the quintessential American story, isn't it?
It truly is. Franklin recounts his father often quoting the proverb, "Seest thou a man diligent in his calling? He shall stand before kings. He shall not stand before mean men." And Franklin says this proverb became a guiding principle in his life.
And did he live up to it?
Amazingly, yes. He writes about how, despite his initial doubts as a young man that he would ever literally stand before kings, he ultimately achieved precisely that. He stood before 5 European kings during his diplomatic career, and he even dined with one, the King of Denmark.
Incredible. From humble beginnings.
Absolutely. This anecdote beautifully highlights the potential long-term rewards of focused effort, continuous self-improvement, and a strong, unwavering work ethic in one's chosen field.
So the idea that consistent, dedicated work, honing your craft, can elevate you beyond perhaps even your wildest dreams.
Exactly. It's a testament to how sustained diligence can lead not only to personal wealth and professional achievement, but also to profound distinction and influence on a much larger stage. It can elevate an individual from a relatively private station, as you put it, to one of global recognition and historical impact. His life story remains this powerful narrative of individual agency, self-creation, and the tangible benefits of unwavering commitment to a calling. It really seems to prove that deliberate, focused effort over time can indeed open doors you never even imagined were possible.
Okay, finally, let's try to tie many of these threads together. from individual decision-making under uncertainty to market dynamics to the nature of power. Let's consider the ethical implications, especially in our world today, increasingly driven by data and technology. Shoshana Zuboff's The Age of Surveillance Capitalism offers a really sobering look at a new frontier of power, where our digital lives aren't just being observed, but maybe actively shaped.
Zuboff introduces this crucial concept of surveillance capitalism.
Yeah.
She describes how major tech companies like Google and Facebook leverage their machine learning expertise and their unrivaled and highly intimate data stores about our behavior, our preferences, our networks.
Right, they know a lot about
An
us.
incredible amount. But Zuboff argues their goal goes beyond merely predicting our future behavior, say, predicting what we might buy next,
It goes beyond prediction. To what?
to intervention and modification. Imagine a system so sophisticated that it doesn't just know you might be about to switch, say, your brand of coffee. It can then subtly nudge your behavior in real time.
Nudge how?
Maybe by showing you a perfectly timed ad for your current brand, just as your loyalty is starting to waver. Or by offering you a personalized discount designed specifically to stabilize your loyalty. Essentially, the goal becomes altering the course of your future choices to achieve a guaranteed outcome for the advertiser or the platform. And often, you wouldn't even realize it's happening.
So it's not just about selling us things based on our predicted interests anymore. It's about actively intervening to guide our decisions towards their desired outcomes. That feels like a really profound shift in the power dynamics.
It is a profound shift. Zuboff argues this illustrates how data is becoming a tool not just for understanding human behavior, but for actively shaping it, often without our full awareness or genuine informed consent.
A new form of power.
She calls it a new form of power, one that seeks these guaranteed outcomes by modifying behavior at scale. And this, of course, presents huge ethical questions about individual autonomy, manipulation, and control. That sense of the collective me, that shared identity we discussed earlier, it can now potentially be systematically influenced, maybe even manufactured, by unseen, algorithm-driven interventions operating in the background of our digital lives.
It raises fundamental questions, doesn't it, about who truly owns and controls our behavioral data? And maybe more importantly, to what extent our choices remain truly our own in an environment increasingly designed for constant, subtle modification.
Exactly. It's a new frontier where all those forces of influence, bias, and strategy we've been discussing are being amplified and operationalized by technology to an unprecedented degree. It's something we really need to grapple with. Hashtag tag tag outro.
Wow, we have truly covered a tremendous amount of ground today, haven't we? Just really spanned the gamut.
We really have. From the nitty-gritty mechanics of economic balances all the way to the deep psychological currents that shape our everyday choices.
Yeah, and the grand strategies involved in building empires, both corporate empires and, well, literal ones from history. It seems crystal clear that understanding the why and the how behind human decisions, behind organizational dynamics, it's just more critical now than maybe ever before.
This deep dive really reveals, I think, that whether you're managing a team or investing your savings in the markets or even just making personal choices about your career or your life, the underlying principles seem remarkably consistent, don't they?
Like what?
Well, things like the need for clear communication, the importance of critical thinking, questioning assumptions, the necessity of adapting to uncertainty, not pretending it doesn't exist, and maybe above all, really understanding human motivation, our own and others.
Yeah, those themes kept coming up again and again.
The true complexity often isn't in the raw facts themselves, but maybe in the details, and especially in our ability to connect those details to the larger patterns. Recognizing when our intuition is genuinely serving us based on solid experience in a predictable domain, and it might just be one of those cognitive biases leading us astray.
So, thinking about our listener, what does this all mean for you? Maybe consider this. In a world where, as we just discussed, data can potentially be used not just to predict, but to actively alter behavior, where subtle nudges we might not even perceive can shape our loyalties, our beliefs, our decisions. How much of your own decision-making is truly authentically your own?
That's a challenging thought.
It is. How much is influenced by the seen, and perhaps more importantly, the unseen forces swirling around you, pulling at those deep-seated psychological currents, those tribal affiliations, those loss aversions we've explored today. Perhaps the greatest deep dive, the most important one you can take after listening to this, is the one into your own motivations, into the assumptions you carry around, often unconsciously, because as so many of these diverse sources seem to show, true insight and maybe even genuine autonomy often begins with questioning what everyone else simply takes for granted.